What is up, my friends? So it's Janie and Edwin again. Just want to say hi, thanks for stopping by. Again, in this video, talk about the Roswell incident. Again, it's a very basic sort of kindergarten understanding of it. At least that's the nicest way I can put it for myself. So there's not a whole lot of, deep conspiracies in it just yet. I am going to do a part 2 where I talk more in depth about it as I go through more information, more conspiracy theories about it. But besides that, just, give this video a like, subscribe if you want to. That's all I really have to say. Okay, bye, enjoy the video, bye. What is up, y'all? So you can see I tried to do something cute with my hair. I suck at it. So if any of you guys have tips for styling very thin hair, I would appreciate it. I need to stop saying It's very annoying when I'm editing. So let's go ahead, get started with the makeup, and as I'm doing it, I will talk about the Roswell incident. So the Roswell incident occurred in 1947. So in late June, early July, this is about the time frame that this is all kind of occurring. This kind of set the scene. In 1947, the US had just, gotten out of World War II. World War II was now over, and people are kind of getting back to trying to figure out a new normal. But of course, around this time, this is sort of the beginning stages of the Red Scare. If you went to American public school, you probably heard about the Red Scare, and maybe not. So basically, around this time, the new fear, now that World War II is over, we have to have something else to be freaked out about, of course. Let me put on my tinfoil hat for you. The Red Scare was involving communism. The new fear, now that we have taken down Hitler and all of that stuff, the new thing for people was that we were worried that communists were going to take over the country. And, as some of you may know, Russia had some spies that kind of came over to the United States and were, doing spy things, but I think that was later on. I don't think that quite happened, but at this point, the fear of communism and America being invaded by communists was kind of the new deal at this time. That's not talking about the other New Deal. That'll be important later on. So in late June, early July, and I'm gonna put the names of the people we're talking about as I edit this because I'm really bad at remembering names, and I'd rather not read off a script because I will stutter a lot if I do that. A rancher was doing ranch things. Yeah, he was driving on a ranch about 80 miles north of Roswell, so kind of in the middle of nowhere, when he noticed something very strange in the desert. He described it was like a string of metal ribbon sort of thing. Like it was just this metal debris just all across the desert. And at the time, he kind of was just like, oh, it's trash. It's weird, but it's trash. And sometime after that, there were reports of aliens up in Washington State. And by aliens, I mean UFOs. So there were these sightings of these unidentified flying objects up in Washington State. Of course, people were panicking, freaking out. There are some people saying it's aliens, and there's people saying it's the communists. They're gonna take over. Once he heard about these other incidences up north, up in the Pacific Northwest, he realized, oh shit, maybe this is something, maybe I should tell somebody about this. Just to clarify, if you hear a lot of noise in the background of this video, it's my birds. They're super, super hormonal. The parakeets are bitching for no reason. They have food, they have fresh water, they have each other's company, but they are just bitching. And one of my parakeets, whenever he talks, it sounds like there's like 50 birds in there. I don't know why. This rancher decides, maybe I should tell somebody about this thing that I found. So he goes back and he collects some of the debris and he brings it down to Roswell. And where are all of my brushes? I have like a really small vanity right here and it's an absolute disaster. I'm not gonna show any of it to you. It's a fucking pain in the ass because all of my stuff keeps getting knocked over, and then when I move things, I can't find them because I'm an idiot. He brings it to the sheriff, and the sheriff's looking at it and he thinks it's really interesting, but he doesn't really know what to make of it. So he's just like, okay, I'm gonna call the Air Force. The Air Force existed at this time. But it's important to note that in Roswell, there was it was called the Roswell Army Airfield. So it was like a small, it was just like a small little Army airfield. It's in the name. Janie, get it together. Calls the leadership there and he's like, hey, got something interesting. Why don't you come on down to the sheriff's office? And the sheriff, what his name was. I believe it's a major. It's either, yeah, it's a major that he calls. Major's a rank in the military, in case you're not familiar with military terms, so they're like important. So he calls this major, and the major comes out and looks at it, and he's like, oh, interesting. I have no idea what to make of this either. So he winds up calling another high-ranking officer. I want to say that's Colonel Blanchard was his name. He calls this high-ranking officer, I believe he was out of Dallas, and he says, hey, somebody's found something. Why don't you come take a gander at it? And in the meanwhile, I'm not entirely sure what exactly happened, but the major, who was from the Roswell Army Airfield, came with the rancher, again, the ranch where all this debris was found. Looked around, and I'm not sure if like the media had gotten a hold of this story, but at some point he made a comment to the media that the Air Force had come into possession of a UFO. So of course that gets put in the news, and people in the area kind of lost their shit. They're like, oh frick, there's aliens. And yeah, people kind of freaked out about it. But of course, the very next day, there's a new article in the newspaper, in the Roswell Daily, whatever it is, local newspaper in Roswell. And it says, just kidding, there's no aliens, it was a misunderstanding, that sort of thing. And then they clarify this by saying that the military has identified it as a weather balloon, and that this weather balloon had crashed, and that's all it was. There was nothing else to it. So in the background of this, the major, I believe that maybe the sheriff did this as well. I will again try to clarify that. So the major made that response to the local newspaper saying, oh, we came in possession of, this mysterious craft. Some of the debris to his house and showed it to his kids, just kind of be like, look what daddy found. I don't know how that conversation actually went. I don't know what his line of thinking was. So later on, many years later, his kids basically comes forward, and I believe it was in a book, and says that they recall there being sort of like remember in elementary school when you had to do those art projects with like hieroglyphics? He said that it looked like something that he had seen from that. It was very similar to hieroglyphics is what they saw. Back at like alien movies, like signs and that sort of thing, a lot of times this alien writing sort of like something on like the Rosetta Stone or something, like it's just kind of, that's probably not the right thing I'm thinking about, but it was very unusual writing, and they sort of described it as being not of this earth. Like it was just very odd writing, not some type of like, it wasn't like Arabic or anything like that. A writing that would be unfamiliar to a child living in the United States, especially in a smaller town. Figure out what the fuck to blend this with. Later on writes about it and says, yeah, I saw something cool, like whatever. To wrap that thought up, the major who had, from Roswell Army Airfield, had brought some of this stuff home. So part of me thinks that maybe he really was like, this is fucking aliens, like there's no way it's anything else. But then, maybe his boss got mad at him, or the Pentagon showed up to his house and threatened his life and was like, you have to retract what you just said. Look, here in the United States, we love war. Me, I just feel like the only reason I could see for the government to cover up, if it really was aliens, is that they're scared. They're like, oh, this is some technology we've never seen before. We can't go to war with these things. Like, and obviously there's some type of enemy because they haven't made themselves known. So there's a lot of theories onto what it was. There's people that say, yeah, it was a weather balloon, like that was it. So another theory that I kind of thought was really, it makes sense for the times, but looking back on it now, it just kind of makes me laugh. So too, specifically during the Holocaust, there was a doctor, one of those people who's very interested in learning about the Holocaust. You've seen this guy's name before. He was a doctor who would experiment on twins specifically, was his thing that he really liked. And he was very fascinated by twins, would basically torture them with these experiments and all of that. So terrible fucking human being, but it was reality at the time. This is something that he did. Dr. Mengele had actually gone to the Soviet Union. The theory was that he had taken some of the kids, or yeah, I guess it was mostly children he experimented on. He had taken them with him to Soviet Russia and had conducted experiments. And one of the things that he would do, and this is like real talk, experiment on children and deform them, like cut off an arm, cut off a leg, you know, different things. Obviously everybody had their tattoos, which, you know, you can look at as a form of, you know, deforming or just otherwise altering the appearance of the victim. The theory is completely that he had taken people that he had been torturing from the Holocaust, or if it was that he, you know, went to Russia or the Soviet Union and took kids from orphanages and all of that. I'm not entirely sure what the theory is on that, but I'm just letting you know. You know what, I'm just gonna completely rewind real quick. So, to backtrack. So, back in Roswell, when all of this initially happened, so again, this is years later that it was being written about, but there was a man who was a coroner for Roswell Army Airfield. So he was the coroner for the Roswell Army Airfield, and he would handle the deceased who came through there. 10 years later, this coroner says that after the Roswell incident, sort of when it was still in the news and everything, he got some strange phone calls from Roswell Army Airfield, and they were saying, you know, how do we deal with small bodies? And the coroner is just kind of like, I mean, that's my, you know, bring them to me, I got it. And they're like, no, we're just wondering. That's definitely not exactly how the conversation went, but that's how it goes in my head. The coroner, you know, noticed that was strange. He thought it was weird, you know, but he just kind of, at the time, didn't really think much of it. And then shortly after, he said that when he was on the base, you know, leaving for the day, or maybe he was out to lunch, I don't really know, but at some point he ran into a nurse that he knew, or that he's probably picked up from the hospital, you know, the deceased patients or whoever. Bottom of the line is he recognized this nurse. He knew her well. Not well, but he had likely run into her a lot in their lines of work. One day that he was getting these weird phone calls from, you know, officials at Roswell Army Airfield, he runs into this nurse he's, you know, friendly with or whatever, and he's like, hey, like, you know, how are you doing? And he said that it was like, basically the best way to describe it was that she looked shocked. She was in shock. She was distraught about something. So he was like, you know, what's going on? Like, why are you so upset? This nurse tells him that she has seen the bodies from this Roswell incident. And he's like, bodies? Like, what are you talking about? And she said that they were, I don't really know how much she elaborated, but she said that they were strange, they were small, they weren't of this earth. They were shocking to her. She didn't know what she was seeing. She seemed very frightened, maybe not so much of the aliens, but maybe because of the fact that she had seen this. Or I say the aliens, not because of these creatures, but maybe she had felt threatened and afraid for her life because she has now witnessed this thing. And so this coroner would go on to later, many years later, he's asked about, you know, this nurse, and he says, I'm not gonna tell. Like, I'm just not. He swore, and never to the day, I'm not sure if he's still alive, but he basically swore on his grave that he would not tell anybody. Going back to this, so when you look up the story, you don't see a lot of straight up information about the bodies that were found. There's really just not a whole lot. There's claims that people saw bodies, but there's no like pictures. Like, you can find pictures of the, I believe it's the sheriff holding some of the debris, if you're interested in that. But there's really not like a whole lot of pictures of the actual scene itself, as far as the debris being found. Basically, when the army was cleaning this place up, they just made sure like nobody was going to be able to see. They like locked that shit down. The Dr. Magdalene, I think is what his name is. There was a theory that he had taken some of the children that he had experimented on and put them into a craft, and he was working with, you know, these Soviet, you know, officials, and that their goal was to put these alien looking children that he has deformed onto an aircraft, aka this weather balloon, just to send it to a heavily populated place in the United States, and to basically just scare them. Like, the goal was that this was supposed to land, you know, let's say like Dallas or somewhere like a bigger city. But something had happened, the craft had missed its landing spot or something. It's basically saying that something happened and the craft did not land in Dallas and instead landed in Roswell. Skip forward to 1994. Actually, I think it was 1992. So this representative from New Mexico, while the world's, you know, while America's at war again and all this stuff's going on, he had his priorities straight. While all this, you know, other war stuff is going on, he decides, hey, I'm gonna need you guys to tell me what the hell is going on in Roswell. I don't know if the people of New Mexico were demanding this or what was going on, if he just became a representative solely for this purpose, but he was like, I demand to know what the hell's happened at Roswell. Let me know. And Congress came back and said, okay. So they put together a team, basically, and compiled a report to release to the public. Google right now and type in the Roswell report, and it's going to take you to like a .mil kind of PDF kind of online thing. It looks like it's 900 pages. When you go through, it's a series of memos of other information that basically outlines what happened at Roswell. So I obviously am not going to take all day to go through it. If you have that kind of, patience or that type of free time, which don't we all right now, then go ahead and, read through it. Tell me if I missed anything. But essentially what the report said was that what actually happened at Roswell was backing up to 1947. The United States has this new little thingy called the Red Scare. And obviously the Red Scare was mostly, that term mostly refers to communists. But there was a fear because the United States had just used the world's first atomic bombs on Japan. Other countries that don't like us, this idea like, oh shit, you can do that? You can just bomb the crap out of something and call it a day? That the Soviet Union had been working on some type of nuclear weapons. And that was the other part of the Red Scare. It wasn't just about communism, although that was probably the most, cushy, palatable kind of thing to tell the public, was we just don't want these communists to come ruin our way of lives. Of course, the public was well aware that there was nuclear weapons involved. The Roswell report says happened was that in 1947, or sometime maybe before then, there was a group that was supposed to kind of be putting their heads together to figure out a way to sort of spy on the Soviet Union. They're testing nuclear bombs. So in order to do this, they built a string of balloons, like weather balloon kind of things. Some type of like, I don't know the full science or verbiage behind it, but basically like this box on it. Which actually I think now that I'm thinking about it, I remember seeing something, it had something to do with acoustics. It could detect the acoustics of that are associated with the nuclear weapons. So either way, so the official report that was released said, yeah, so we were testing these things, we were balloon goofing, and things got out of hand. They broke loose, they didn't go where they were supposed to, they wound up crashing in Roswell, and we didn't want to release this information to the public because, so that was the official report. The official report came out and said, you know, we were just balloon goofing and we screwed up, which to me is believable. Like, you know, there's certain things, if you've ever worked for a government or for the military, no matter what country you're in, there's certain things you just don't release to the public, because even though, you know, we can trust our own people, it's not like we really have control of this information. We can't, you know, say, who's to say they put out this newspaper and it's just gonna stay right there. Like, that's not gonna happen. That just is not gonna happen. Always the conspiracy nut in me that's like, okay. It was funny, in this report, they came out and said, you know, all this stuff about, you know, we were just testing these balloons because we were trying to spy on the Soviet Union, and it was a failed experiment or whatever. So they came out with that in 1992, and then I don't believe, I could be wrong in the year, but several years later, like I want to say it was like 2000, maybe like 1999, somewhere in there, the government put out a kind of a part 2 where it said, oh hey, by the way, those bodies, because I don't know if somebody like demanded, they were like, you didn't talk about the bodies, but they said, oh yeah, those bodies that you saw, oh yeah, by the way, we were also testing atmosphere dummies with these balloons, which to me makes zero sense at all. Actually, one of those balloons that are meant to test for the possibility of nuclear weapons being used, why would you attach dummies to it? Like, that kind of seems like a silly thing. So there's a lot more information, a lot more stories on the Roswell incident that you can look into. Pretty much everybody that had directly had a hand in it has written some book or something about it. I actually have a book on my Audible right now that it's so boring. Not gonna lie, it's not that interesting, and I think it's mostly just the narration of it. I'm not even gonna say its name, but it's about the Roswell incident, and it kind of goes through more information on it. But to me, this was just like intro version of the Roswell incident, because I never knew like the full story of what happened with it and why it's sort of one of those things that comes up in conversation. Anytime you talk about conspiracy theory, especially when it's involving the government, it always comes up. But it's going back to, you know, the initial report where the major from Roswell Army Airfield, you know, said, oh shit, there's aliens, and then, you know, took it back. So what's interesting to me is, why would you do that? First of all, even if it was aliens, why would you want to bring attention to this area? It's a pretty heavy military area. It's got, you know, I believe not too far from there is where they tested one of the world's first like nuclear bombs or atomic bombs or something. I forget which one it is. But this is a pretty, like, Roswell at the time was sort of like an Area 51, like, little brother kind of situation. Like, it was a very secretive, high up there sort of military place. Like, it wasn't, you know, like a gigantic booming military place like, you know, the Pentagon. Interesting to me. Like, I feel like as a military officer, you know, maybe things were different back then, but honestly, this guy's probably why the military has people, their entire career, hold up. This is why now the military probably has, you know, people whose entire career field is releasing information to the public. Like, I feel like this guy invented it, like, unintentionally. like unintentionally invented military like PA as like a career field. So I just think that's kind of funny, like honestly. I'm kind of rushing now because my phone's about to die and my charger won't reach this spot. So excuse me for a second. Here is my highlighters. I want to glow. Let me glow. So yeah, like I said, this is kind of a very basic understanding of the Roswell incident, what it was and everything. So I'll probably do a part 2 when I find out more information. We'll go ahead and put some more information into captions, just like names and everything. I know it's important, but I'm really bad with names in general. So anyways, so that is kind of the basics of the Roswell incident. I'm gonna do part 2 eventually once I get more information kind of compiled in my brain, because if I try to read it off a piece of paper, it's just not gonna happen. But yeah, so thanks for hanging out. If you hung out, if you didn't, that's fine too. I don't really care. I'm new to this YouTube shit. I don't really know what the hell I'm doing. But either way, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great weekend that's coming up. Maybe if I get this uploaded in time. But yeah, thanks.